Hello, Professor Iyer and class. Today I will be doing my oral presentation on death discoveries. During my research for Take-Home Essay 3, I made numerous discoveries that went beyond the scope of the assignment that I feel should be shared with the class. I very much enjoyed reading Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doty, and I continued to do research on her as an author, and so I wanted to share my findings that I ended up learning from her. So Caitlin Doty has been extremely impactful to the funeral industry based on her books. She is a 2-time New York bestselling author. She is also a YouTube sensation, and she has over 1 million subscribers and plenty of videos. She really knows her stuff about this industry, and she works very hard to try to help the American public become aware of their death, of living in a culture of death and denial, and I really respect that about her. I was actually inspired by her and inspired by one of our assignments. One of our discussion questions called for us to watch one of Caitlin's YouTube videos. So I watched the video and I was really inspired by her way of informing the public through these YouTube videos that were super educational and informative. So I kind of went crazy and I watched a ton of her videos on YouTube because I really enjoyed them and I ended up learning a lot from them. So I'm going to share those discoveries with you guys today. She has a ton of videos on YouTube, and after just watching a couple, I was hooked. You can see here that she has a wide range of topics she discusses, and they're all very informative. But my 2 favorite videos that I learned the most from are these 2. First is Caitlin Doty's video on death in Disney. She goes on and explains Walt Disney's obsession with death, and it's very interesting and intriguing, so I'm going to share my findings from that, as well as how our funeral homes dealing with COVID. This video, Caitlin describes the impact COVID has on funeral homes, and I thought it was very relevant, and I learned a lot just from this video, so I'll be sharing those findings as well. So first, the video titled Death in Disney, Walt's Morbid Obsession. Caitlin initially goes on in this video to describe Disney as a positive propaganda. But what's interesting is Walt was actually fascinated with death, and some say he was almost obsessed with it. For example, his famous character and first character, Mickey Mouse, was originally named Mortimer, and Mort is actually the Latin root for death. So there is a weird correlation right there. Walt Disney also had many death-related encounters in his life. At a young age, he had an encounter with an owl and ended up violently killing it. His wife and him had multiple miscarriages before they had their 2 daughters, and that also took a very big toll on him. His mother also had a violent early death. She died at a young age, and if you haven't noticed, that correlates with most Disney characters being motherless. He also had an experience with a fortune teller that told him he would die at the age of 35, and he did end up having an early death. Not quite 35, but he died early. So it's interesting to see the correlation between death and Disney, because Disneyland is the happiest place on earth, and death, when you're at Disneyland, you are most likely not thinking about death whatsoever. So I really like that connection that Caitlin made. The second video I found really intriguing was titled, How Are Funeral Homes Dealing with COVID? So there's a misconception that funeral directors are stoked about COVID-19 because they're profiting from it and all the dead bodies are making them money. Well, this is actually not true. It's actually really hard for the funeral directors and the funeral industry. The hardest hit cities are having to turn people away from having funerals and being cremated, which is really hard for them to do. Funeral homes also aren't offering viewings for families. So before a cremation, usually a family will come and view the body before it's cremated, and that isn't being allowed whatsoever. There's also a fear for the embalmers of contracting COVID from a corpse. So they are getting all these infected bodies, and they're could be a chance that they could contract this disease just from doing their job. It's interesting how this relates to death being in our conscious mind nowadays because of COVID and all the deaths. It's becoming more prevalent for people to talk about it, for people to think about it. And so Caitlin did express that a lot, and I learned a lot from this video. And it was interesting how she connected our conscious of death into how funeral homes are dealing with COVID. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new about death and denial today.